Welcome back to the Candy Corn Quilt Shop Quilt Along. We are in week 3, September 15th. There's a link below to download your free schedule. Let's look at what we'll be stitching up today. Today we're working on 4 blocks: boo hoop, home hoop, eek hoop, and then the fabric shelves. At the end of last week's video, we went over the background quilting for this, but in case you're just joining us for the first time, you can find this guide down at the bottom here. Is your quilting file for your fabric shelves. And then in the middle of the page are the quilting files for the hoops if you're using the background quilting for this project. I have all my fabric and batting ready to go. I have my fusible on the back of all of my fabrics. At the end of last week's video, I went over fabric sizes and cutting and organization for this week, so you can go back and refer to that if you need to. Let's go ahead and hoop our stabilizer. I'm using my Kimberbell light mesh cutaway stabilizer. This is the 20 by 10 size. I'm going to do all the hoops together, so we're going to do the first 3 blocks together in a 9.5 by 14 inch hoop. I also talked about last week how I load my stabilizer and saving the extra. You can refer back to that video. Let's go ahead and go over to the machine and get started. I'm working on a Baby Lock Meridian. All my files are on USB. I'll show you how I organize those and we'll get everything loaded. Here's my folder for Candy Corn Quilt Shop. I went ahead and made a folder for each block, and then in each folder I drop in the files that I need. So the first one is the boo hoop, and you'll see there's 2 files here, my quilting and my embroidery. I'm going to load all of the quilting files first, just like we did last week with the tombstone blocks. That way the quilting files stitch out first. I'm going to hit set, and then I need to move this so I can fit more than one in my hoop. There's one. I'm going to hit add. Let's do the home hoop next. I'm going to put that one right over there. You want to leave some space in between so they're easy to cut and separate from each other. And then we'll do the eek hoop. This one I'm going to move off to the side. And you'll see they're close, but they're not too close. I'll be able to work with that. They do fit top to bottom. I did try fitting them all top to bottom and sliding the fabric shelves in. My hoop wasn't wide enough. If you've got a bigger machine than this, you might be able to do that. Now we're going to go back and we're going to add our embroidery files. We've got our boo hoop. My quilting is already placed, so this is a nice reminder that this block goes on the candy corn. I'm going to select that, hit set, and I'm going to drag it over to the candy corn. I like to drag and drop like that. If you want to get really precise, you can hit edit and move. And here's some arrows. See, it moves in very, very small increments. Let's go ahead and do that and center it. That looks really good. We'll hit OK. And let's go ahead back to add. Home hoop is next. I'm looking for that background quilting up and down like that. It's a good reminder in case I forget what I put where. It's the chevron. It's going to go here. I'm going to purposefully not center it. Now let's hit edit and move. You can move one at a time, or you can hold it and it'll scooch it a little faster. You see that? So you can do this any way you want. Drag and drop or use the little arrows. That looks good. And let's get our last one loaded. It's going to be the eek hoop. Spider. Not a big fan of spiders out here. We have tarantulas and scorpions. Black widows too, although it's very rare to see one of those. That looks nice and centered. Before I do anything else, I'm saving it to my machine's memory, which I did last week, and it was a good thing I did. Had a little glitch last time, and if you have it saved to your machine, or you can save it to the USB, if something happens or you need to stop and come back the next day, it's not a problem. Let's go ahead and hit embroidery. As we work through each block, I'm going to pick my colors. If you've got the instructions and you want to refer to the color chart, all the colors are in the instructions. But I'm using my own threads, and I'm using some glow-in-the-dark threads and a couple different colors. Here's how this is going to stitch out. And this is because I placed background quilting, and background quilting. They're all different, so they haven't been duplicated. If I had duplicated the same file, it would do each step 3 times, but each block was added. So the first thing that's going to stitch is a batting placement line, a batting tack down line, fabric placement, fabric tack down, and quilting. And the first block that's going to stitch is the first one that I placed. So we'll walk through this one slowly, and then I'll do these 2 with music, but I will show you all my thread choices as we go. I've got a neutral thread on my machine. These are the types of needle that I'm using. Let's get started with our batting placement line. Grab your batting, cover the placement line, and stitch the tack down. You need to trim off all your excess batting before you go to the next step. Next step is your fabric placement line. Grab your background fabric. Make sure your placement line is covered. You can add a piece of tape if you like, and then you'll stitch your fabric tack down line. I'm going to pick a color thread for my background quilting. I'm going to use this bright green. This is a glow-in-the-dark thread. Information on this thread will be in the description box below. If I had orange glow-in-the-dark, I'd use that because it's candy corn. I've got my glow-in-the-dark thread on the machine. I'm going to stitch the background quilting. All the quilting is stitched out. It's kind of hard to see because I picked a color that blends in. We're going to go through the same steps for the home hoop, and then over here will be the eek hoop. I'll stop for each one and show you the color thread that I'm going to use for the background quilting. Otherwise, the steps are exactly the same as what we just did. Don't forget to change your thread back to your neutral thread. I don't have a purple glow-in-the-dark thread. I'm going to use the gray. I did that last time with the cobwebs. That'll look good on the purple. For the background quilting for this one, I'm going to try the pink. I don't have orange. Here's the color number. The pink looks just fine. You can see I've got a fabric overlap here. Before I do anything else, I'm going to fold this out of the way because we're going to work on these 2 blocks for the applique. I don't want it to get caught on anything. And just go ahead and tape it up and out of the way. You could also trim it off. It's going to be trimmed off at the end anyway when we trim our blocks. Just up to you if you feel like getting up and stepping away from your machine. And if not, just tape it out of the way. We're going to be working on our hoop applique. The color I picked is a gray, and I have a gray thread. So I'm going to put my gray thread on the machine to start. Stitch out your placement line. You want to place your hoop fabric over that placement line. Make sure to cover it completely. I'm going to add a small piece of tape here at the top. Let's stitch our tack down. Go ahead and trim away the extra fabric, and then we're going to stitch the word boo. I'm going to put my black thread on my machine. Got my black thread on. We're going to stitch the word boo. The next step is the ghost fill. So far I've only used the glow-in-the-dark in the background. I've got to use glow-in-the-dark white for the ghost. That just makes sense. So for my ghost fill, I'm going to put the glow-in-the-dark white. Switching back to black, we're going to do the ghost outline and the eyes. I'm switching to this color. It's the one I'm using for gray. It's a silvery gray. We're going to stitch the little screw at the top of the embroidery hoop. I pulled this color from my thread wall for the embroidery hoop. In the instructions, they just have a color called brown. The boo hoop is done. It came out really cute. We have 2 more hoops to work on, and it's the same process. We've got the home, sweet haunted home, and the eek hoop. The eek hoop, everything's in black. We have a black spider and the black text, and then the same outside frame and screw at the top. And home, sweet haunted home, same outside frame, same screw at the top. The words home and home are in black, and in the middle it says sweet haunted. They're in an orange. You can refer to the instructions, see if it's the dark orange or the light orange. I'm going to use this orange. Since these 2 hoops stitch out pretty much the same, I'll set them to music. You can watch it stitch out while you're doing your own stitch out, and then we'll go on to the fabric shelves. We'll trim all of our blocks together at the end. They look great. There's some jump threads in some of these. We're going to go ahead and pull off this hoop and we're going to start on our fabric shelves. I'll be using an 8x12 hoop for the fabric shelves. There is an option to do this block as a 5x7 double hooping. I won't be doing that today, but if you need that, those instructions are found on the CD that's included with this kit. If you got the digital download, it's on the instructions. Let's bring up the fabric shelves. I have my background quilting ready to go. I'm going to load that, set that, and then add the embroidery file. My machine automatically centers that. I'm ready to go. The first few steps are the same as what we've been doing, so I'll move through that. I'll set it to music. You have your batting placement, batting tack down, trim your batting, fabric placement, fabric tack down, and background quilting. For my background quilting on this block, I'm going to use the white glow-in-the-dark thread. I've got my neutral thread on my machine. Let's run through all of those steps. The background quilting is done. It's kind of hard to see because it's white on white and it's under the bright light of the machine. You want to switch to your neutral thread color, and we're going to stitch out the placement line for our shelving unit fabric. The placement line has stitched out, again, really hard to see, neutral thread on white background, but if you cut your fabric according to the instructions, you've got more than enough fabric to cover. I'm going to go ahead and tape that, and then we're going to stitch the tack down line. Once that line has stitched out, we've got to trim everything outside of that line. We're going to stitch the back panel placement line, and it does say to continue stitching with the neutral color, so I'm going to leave my neutral thread color on. You want to get your back panel fabric. They picked a gray. I picked a yellow just for fun. Go ahead and cover all of these lines and put some tape there. And we're going to stitch the tack down line. Everything is stitched. What we want to keep are the pieces that are going to look like the back of the shelf. I'll go ahead and trim mine up and you can get an idea what it's going to look like. There's what it looks like after it's trimmed. I've got a lot of loose threads. I probably need to get a lint roller. The next step is easier to see on the screen than on the instructions. Shelf bottom detail. They're using brown. I'm going to use that gold brown color that I picked for my embroidery hoops. There are the little shelf details. I'm going to switch to black thread. We're going to stitch out, there's a little spider, and then after that is the satin outline. Black satin stitching has stitched. I can actually see some of my yellow fuzzies poking through. I'll probably have to pull those out with tweezers, or I may just leave them. It makes it look kind of like an old bookshelf. The next thing that's going to stitch is right across the top. It's another satin stitch detail. They use gray in the instructions. I'm going to go all in with my yellow. Why not? I'm going to stitch this in yellow. It's going to look like a haunted bumblebee bookshelf. Here we go. I've got a lot of the background fabric showing through. It's not a very tight satin stitch. I'm going to do it again. My bobbin thread also ran out in the middle. I'm going to run this over one more time. That looks much better. Now I've got full coverage. So if you stitch out that top detail with the gray and you don't like the way it looks, if it looks like there's too much space in between, just do it again. We're going to stitch a little spool at the top, and then in the bottom corner, a spider web. I'm going to use my white glow-in-the-dark thread. Next we're going to stitch a little green jelly roll and some fabric details. I pulled a new color. I thought about doing that in the glow-in-the-dark, but this is going to show up much better. Look at that. That's really bright. That's really intense. That is a bright green. We're going to stitch some jelly roll detail and some white fat quarters. I'm going to switch to regular white, not glow in the dark. The next step, it says to stitch the dark orange fat quarter fill. This is the color I'm using for orange. So far I've only used one orange throughout. I'm going to switch to purple. I think I just pulled this one too. We're going to stitch some purple fat quarters. And the last thing we're going to stitch for this block is some yellow fat quarters. All done stitching this out, aside from some of the yellow poking through. I really like the way this looks. Remember, we're going to add some little bolts of fabric on here at the end. Let's go trim our blocks. We've got all of our blocks done for this week. We need to trim these. The first thing I want to do is separate them. I don't want to try to trim them from this big piece. I've got a nice piece of stabilizer here that I can save. Probably another piece there. I'm going to separate these blocks and get the extra off this one. All of your hoop blocks are going to trim to 4.5 inches squared. We went over in the last video in detail how to use these orange pop rulers. That video will be linked below. But you've got a 4.5 inch and then a 6.5 inch square that just helps you to have your hand steady. So we can use these for our hoop blocks. Remember to place them along the lines. I'll link the rotating cutting mat and the orange pop rulers below. I don't have my bottle of water handy, but I'm going to use that as a little weight to help hold that down. Remember to slide your ruler all the way to the left. All of our hoop blocks are trimmed. Let's trim up the bookshelf. They show us using orange pop rulers for this. The final trim size for this block is 6.5 by 10.5. What they have you doing is using the rectangle orange pop rulers, the 6.5 by 8.5 and the 8.5 by 10.5. It tells you to visually center it. So you would line up, I guess, the sides, and then they tell you to take this one off. Then you have to move this one anyway. And then you're going to cut here and here, leaving the side edges, and then removing this one and putting this one on to cut the side edges. Let's go ahead and do that. Also, if you don't have the orange pop rulers, and honestly, this is probably easier for this one. A lot of us have standard quilting rulers. This is 6.5 inches wide. There's your 6.5. You can line it up on your stitching lines. There's one there. Let's see there. It actually goes just over the stitching lines, but you could line it up and cut your 6.5 and then measure it this way to get the 10.5. But let's use the orange pop rulers since we have them. They come in a square set and a rectangle set. I'm just going to put the big one on. That's the one we're going to do first. All we want to do here is trim the top and the bottom. So I'm not worried about, you know, is it over here, is it over here, is it centered? I just need to make sure here and here is lined up. That looks good. Let's go ahead and turn. Zooming out for that one, I'm holding with this hand over here. And we're going to cut straight across the top and straight across the bottom into that little notch. Don't cut your fingers. Straight across the top. And we'll turn. And then we're going to cut straight across the bottom. Watch your fingers. That part is cut. Now we're going to grab the smaller ruler, the 6.5 by 8.5, and go ahead and place that inside. And we want to make sure that we're lined up on those side stitching lines. Just take your time. Make sure you're lined up correctly. Not that it matters if it goes in a little bit crooked. It's a Halloween quilt. It would probably just add to the charm. All lined up, we're going to cut our two sides. Let's have a look and make sure I did that right. I did, but you can see you still need to cut a little bit off here, 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 and here. So we're going to grab a regular ruler and extend the cut line straight. This should measure 6.5 by 10.5. Got a little skinny ruler here. Let's use the little half inches. 6.5, very good. And I'm a little bit shy of 10.5. Yeah, I have it a little bit short, but I use the orange pop rulers. I'm sure it will be fine. We have everything trimmed. Let's go through what we need for next week, and then we'll get a final look at all our blocks together. Next week, we're going to work on Show and Share, the Emmy Witch, Boulevard Witch, and the Haunt Witch. You're going to need your embellishment kit for this. If you don't have the embellishment kit, it's not a big deal. We're using a little glitter vinyl. You can use fabric, felt, whatever you have. While this was stitching out, doing all of that black satin stitching, I pulled and trimmed all my fabrics. I do need to put my fusible on the back of everything before next week, but I'll show you what I have for each block. These are the blocks right here. And if you're using a fabric kit, if you still have one, or you've ordered the fabrics, go ahead and refer to that for your fabric selection, but I'll show you what I picked. For the Show and Share block, I picked the spider web print for my background, black for the sign. There's the purple glitter vinyl. Let me show you that in case you're working with the embellishment kit. I'll show you where to find measurements for this in just a moment. This block has a finished size of 4.5 by 8.5, so I cut my batting 5.5 by 9.5. There's my batting. And again, I'm going to put fusible on the back of all of my fabrics, not on the back of the glitter vinyl. Don't do that. That would be bad. This is the M.E. Witch, and the little quilts and the hands, all these little quilts and their little green hands are in the embellishment kit. I'm going to do all the embellishments at the end. I kept my background for the witches the same. This is my background for all the witch blocks. The M.E. Witch has background and black glitter vinyl. The final trim size on this one is 6.5 by 8.5, so I cut my batting 7.5 by 9.5. This is the Boulevard Witch. For her top, I grabbed a charm square of the purple with the bats, so this is much bigger than the cut size that you need. You can refer to the cut size in the instructions. Black for the skirt, purple glitter vinyl for the hat. This one is a different size than the other two witches. The final size is 4.5 by 8.5, so I cut my batting 5.5 by 9.5. There's my batting. This is the Haunt Witch background, black glitter vinyl for the hat, and for the skirt, I didn't have the orange with white polka dots, but I have black with orange polka dots. The trim size is 6.5 by 8.5. Cut my batting 7.5 by 9.5. Let's go over embellishments and background quilting. In your instructions on page 6, you can find all of the embellishments listed and the cut sizes. You've got your black applique glitter. We're using that for two of the witches, the Emmy Witch and the Haunt Witch. And then they call the purple lavender applique glitter. That's for the Boulevard Witch. And for the Show and Share Lollipop Light. Here's our background quilting guide. They're all right next to each other for next week, so that makes it easy to find. So look for number 5, 6, 7, and 8 if you're using the background quilting bundle. Let's get a quick look at our quilt blocks before we sign off today. We've got the Boo Hoop, our E-Coop, Home Sweet Haunted Home Hoop, and then we've got our bookshelf. And again, we're going to be adding embellishments to this later. You can see them right here in the picture. Make sure you come back next week, September 22nd. We're going to do the Show and Share, Emmy Witch, and Boulevard Witch. Those are all of our blocks for this week. Thank you so much for quilting along with me. Please comment below if you have any questions or another project you'd like to see. Otherwise, I'll see you back here September 22nd. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you next time.